think of somebody who is courageous in every situation, who never doubts, who never falters. Okay, maybe like once, but that's it. And then learns from their mistakes and moves on. All right, not exactly. This is how I used to view a leader. Somebody who is damn near perfect. You don't hear about how Martin Luther King and Gandhi both struggled with depression. Each had a suicide attempt early on in their life. You don't hear about the bout JFK had with depression. See, it's not so easy to reconcile two opposing forces. Nor is it so well known, this connection between leadership and mental illness. Yet it's the desire to reconcile these two forces that I propose is crucial, a crucial asset among leaders. To persevere amidst failure, to move forward despite anguish, to never give up, as the saying goes. There's an interesting thing about never giving up, and there's an interesting thing about surrendering. Surrendering to the process, surrendering to what is. There's a certain power in that. I don't consider perseverance to be at odds with surrender. When I say never give up, what I'm saying is never squashing that internal voice that tells us what we know to be true. Never settling for less than what we know to be best. Sometimes it's in this process of falling that we remember to get back up. I've spent much of my life reconciling these two forces, these two extremes. Early on in my life, struggling with anxiety, depression. Meanwhile, falling in love with football and imagining myself to be an NFL wide receiver. Fast forward a few years, striving to be an actor, going to New York City for auditions. Meanwhile, coming back home to get drugs, struggling with addiction. Extreme forces, extreme desires seem to be intricately woven. There's a great book called First Rate Madness, which goes into this, connecting mental illness with some of the greatest leaders the world has ever known. Even Abraham Lincoln struggled with depression. And it suggested that because of his depression, he had the empathy and the insight to deal with one of the biggest challenges of his time, of his presidency. Now, it's not to say if you're crazy, you must be a leader. Or if you're a leader, you must be crazy. It's just to say that these two paths often intersect, and it's what happens at that intersection which seems to make or break a leader. One of my favorite musicians, Lindsey Sterling, recently said after losing a close friend, "Life is about picking yourself up over and over again. You can rise past your trials. You can be brave." It's this type of conviction that I relate to the most. Born out of struggle. This would be called authoritative leadership, coming from life experience, giving us authority in a specific area. My authority came from dealing with addiction and mental illness. However, that's just one side of the coin. The other side is what you call innovative leadership, born out of creativity or inspiration. The times I feel I've most embodied this type of leadership, or when I've co-created experiences for others based on sources of inspiration in my own life. For example, the Poetry Slam. An interactive experience for all involved. Each poet is given a few minutes to share an original poem. And they're randomly judged by members of the audience. Poets are encouraged to express themselves authentically. The audience is encouraged to give honest feedback, Snap your fingers if you like a poem. Stomp your feet if you don't. Love the poet, even if you don't love the poem. Ultimately, the Poetry Slam is a perfect environment to be supported in this dance of light and dark, inner and outer, self and community. One participant even called it a mixture of a healing ceremony and a community building event. Another attributed it to finding her long lost voice. It's amazing what can happen when the things that we go through in the dark are brought out into the light. When our fears or struggles become avenues to freedom rather than a pathway to bondage. It's my hope that mental illness be seen as a potential asset rather than a lifelong liability. And just because you're struggling today or broken today doesn't mean you can't be a leader tomorrow. My name is Dylan. I'm a passionate, creative, visionary leader, and I hope we get to explore this path of leadership together while exploring what's possible on the other side of despair.